continuing our series, MentorEd, through Alliance Tutoring. And today I wanted to take an approach, an etymological approach. Obviously, I'm a literature teacher and I'm a wordsmith. Some of the most important ways that I've come to understand new things is by taking a look at how the word or words have altered over time. It's important to me that my students know this, not simply because a wider vocabulary makes for a more impressive speaker or writer, but because housed within every new word is a history. Housed within every new word is a changing series of meanings and evocations. So today I wanted to spend some more time on curiosity, a quality that I have long held as one of the most important for students to exhibit, and probably one of those that is most difficult to do so. Certainly it's most difficult to track. It's a little bit like you'll know it when you see it, but I think there's also something to be said for the value of curiosity in a day and an age in which all things are available all the time. Market forces seem to be influencing the educational realm more and more frequently. And families are wondering just what they can do to help their children achieve success, whatever success looks like. But we want our kids to be happy and healthy, well-informed, and productive. And for my money, curiosity is one of the primary traits that we can foster in our kids in order to make all those things happen. Curiosity is central to becoming versus being. It's a concept that I've played around with a little bit, both in writing as well as in recent conversation. Curiosity is always about the future. It's always about what's next. It's about enjoying the things that one knows and learns, but it's also an essentially forward-looking trait, one that holds out the promise of new things to behold, new ways to understand the world and oneself. So, after that quick discussion about the future, let's go back to the past. Curiosity is based on the Latin word curio. Some of us have been to a curio shop in which we see odd or strange things from the past. In fact, some people are collectors in that sense. And if we think about it, curiosity is an essential collector's trait. Curio means care. It means concern. It means trouble, like taking the trouble. And someone who is curious, or a curioso, is someone who is interested in study. Occasionally that word, and this goes all the way back to the 1300s. The Latin form, of course, would have come around much, much earlier. But in the 1300s, when the word was first really being charted, whether or not that's the Oxford English Dictionary, I got some of my information about this from the online etymological dictionary. Remember, kids, you always cite your sources. And in the 1300s, it was really meant to describe study and a method of healing. I think that's really crucial, that study and taking an interest in the wider world could be a method of healing. And what trauma that might be healing, I think, is probably something that each individual, and certainly each family, would need to define for themselves. Well, another aspect of curiosity is inquisitiveness, as I've said, and skilled workmanship. And I like that idea about the curious girl or boy who is working in a way with their mind towards the pursuit of some new expertise. And that could be an expertise, like I discussed with my daughter this morning, about whales and sharks. That could be an expertise in the super abstruse peripatetic philosophers that I've been recently reading about from ancient Greece. Of course, it could be a dive into advertising in the Mad Men age. It doesn't matter, of course. What matters is that someone finds an idea, finds an era, finds a concept or a pursuit of academic interest and dives fully into it in a way that promises mastery, although perhaps some of us only get to be journeymen or apprentices or novices. Now, there was a negative use of curiosity, and this does come during the medieval ages primarily. I'm actually reminded of a passage from the Canterbury Tales when I used to teach Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. That was published in, about 1400. And so this would have come cheek by jowl right in the usage that I'm describing. And the negative vision of curiosity was that it was overly prying, that it was meddling in affairs that weren't yours, that it was a kind of vanity to presume that all knowledge was someone's to take and to own. And I won't go into all of the details, but in that single story from Chaucer's major work, there was a moment when we were told in full earnestness that one should not look too closely into God's privities, into God's privates, into his private understandings, and you can think of the rest from there too in the other meaning. Now, when we come to the 1700s, we find that the way that curiosity has changed is it's become diligence matched with choosiness. Diligence matched with choosiness. There's that aspect of freedom again, of liberty, which of course would have been inspiring to the political philosophers during that day and age when so many of our democracies were first beginning to take root in Europe and obviously here in America. And it was an inspiration, I suppose, to learn, and to learn that which makes one stronger. Curiosity had the sense that there was an end goal which was continued strength, that it had stopped being simple, don't mess around in your neighbor's affairs, don't look too closely into things that don't concern you, and instead it had become a desire to learn and a desire to hold on to that learning. And if you'll allow me, it actually reminds me of a couple of stories from my own teaching career, and I like to use these anecdotes as demonstrations of some of my thought. So if you forgive me, I taught a course in the humanities once, and I remember that one of the boys who was in the back row, who was quite smart. I don't remember if he was first or second or fifth in the class, but he was quite smart. And when I say smart, it just meant that he had access to information quickly because he had a lot of information that was already in his mind. His parents were they were educated, sure. They had gone to school, but the thing that he relied upon the most, I think, was not simple cognitive power, that was important, but he had insane background reading. He had just read a bunch of stuff. And I remember teaching a course on the Parthenon and on a number of the different statues that were all, of course, white marble. And one of the students, a different student, said, wow, this is beautiful. You can see, some of the technique inside these white marble statues, yada, yada. And this young man said, well, they weren't like that. Not then. And everybody kind of said, what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, they were all painted up. They were painted in full Technicolor. And this was before I had gotten to this moment in the lecture. But this young man already had that background knowledge. And I said, boy, that is really cool. Where did you come by that? And he said, give me a couple of days, and I'll show you. And so he sent a note back to his parents, who dutifully sent over the book on ancient Grecian statuary that he had read when he was like 12 or 13 years old, and he remembers this as a senior in high school. It was a wonderful moment of curiosity and how it can contribute to the greater group, and also how it makes for strange connective tissue in one's own learning. There was another boy. I happened to be teaching at a boys' school during this time. There was another boy who was there to play basketball, probably 6'7", as a 17-year-old, and he was he self-identified as someone who was not particularly academic. He didn't think of himself as a student. He thought of himself as an athlete, and he was gifted in both ways, although he didn't know it. And the curiosity that was on display there was one that I never would have expected. I was reading Dante's Inferno with some of these boys, in translation, of course. And it's a tall ask for even those of us with degrees. And these were boys that needed to be introduced to some of the wider world, like I've said, with curiosity. And boys that knew very keenly that this was maybe just a little beyond them at the moment that they inhabited. Not beyond them forever, but beyond them at the moment they inhabited. And so we walked through, and we did our thing, and we traversed all the circles of hell with Dante. And this young man was an artist. He was a pretty good artist from St. Louis, as I recall. And he had been sketching over the course of our lectures and our discussions, and I would always try to pull him back to his own notebook and say, you really need to be doing X, Y, and Z. You got to take this down. It's going to be on the quiz, that kind of thing. A very non-curiosity-oriented thing for a teacher to say, by the way. But he had been working, and at the end, I had the kids submit an extra credit project if they wished. Most kids wanted it because it was going to help with their grade, but a couple of kids were just sort of liked the whole weirdness of Dante Alighieri's Walk Through Hell. They thought it was a strange old poem, and they were right. And the boy came to me, and he had 5 sheets, as I remember, 5 sheets of sketchbook paper that had been done with charcoal and a little ink. And he said, I'm sending these back to my cousin in St. Louis. And I said, okay, neat. That's pretty fun. I don't know exactly, what I ought to do with these, but they were scenes from the Inferno. They were scenes of major characters. There was Charon, who was the river master with his eyes of wheeling flame. There was an amazing scene of a devil. There were all sorts of things details that he had included in this. He said, I'm going to send this back to my cousin in St. Louis. And I said, okay, what is is your cousin a Dante expert with it? And he says, no, he's a tattoo artist. And he said, I'm going to get one of these on my back, and I'm going to ask if he would like to have all of these to give out to his potential clients. Dante would make a great tattooist. That's curiosity on display. A couple more. How do you recognize curiosity? How do you reward curiosity? What is the good of curiosity? These are all fabulous questions. How do you initiate curiosity in order for it to have some benefit later on? And when parents would come in for either a parent-teacher conference or when they would come in on sort of parents' night at one of the day schools where I worked, I would sit down and I taught AP Literature and AP Language. These are juniors and seniors that are taking the kind of highest level academic English course that was around. And the AP Lit parents, that's the senior course, would invariably ask, what is it that my child needs to do in order to perform well in this course, to get a 5 on the exam, which is the highest that you could get, and of course to get into whatever college of choice that might be. And my advice always, curiosity-based, was, well, right now you need to go back in time and have them read twice as much as they did during their childhood. No filter. Read everything they come across. I'm talking about the back of the Cheerios box. I'm talking about Dad's Financial Times, the pink paper. I'm talking about Princess in Black and Harry Potter and everything up to, over, and in between. Don't have a filter at all. Just let them read widely and tell them that it's good. Don't give them the opportunity to squeak out of it, and don't make it an antagonistic process. Make it always the process of discovery, and reward them for reading something new by giving them something new to read. You'll always benefit, every student, child, teacher, adult will always benefit from looking at their bedside table and going, oh, I've got another one that I can dig into. This is going to be great. Here's the other thing. Reward the knowing that comes with curiosity, not the utility, not the what's it going to do for me when I get out of college, what's it going to do for me to get into college, what's it going to do for me to get my parent off my back about my grades. Curiosity makes a life. It doesn't make a resume. And I'll tell you one more, because this one always makes me happy. I taught a young woman 20 years ago, who, as a junior, left high school as a junior, graduated early, and she went on to Yale. She was quite bright, as you would expect. And every single summer, since she was a young one, her family spent the summer building up a little cabin that they had in Vermont, extending it, putting in new rooms. They got to learn a trade that way. They got to learn all about building and whatnot. But of course, as you would think, during those summers in Vermont, there were no screens, there was no television. This was just right after the dawn of the internet. This was going to be the early aughts. And so there were no devices of any sort that were allowed, just books and books and books that lined the walls. And every afternoon and every evening, she had 3 sisters, as I recall. All the girls and the parents, they would just sit by the lake and they would read. And in the evenings, they would make dinner and they would read. And in the mornings, they would work on the house and then they would read. And of course, as a literature teacher, I want everyone to read as widely as this. The reason this curiosity piece occurs to me is because that was family modeling of the best sort. And because as we were reading the play Hamlet during her junior year, just before she graduated early, she made an argument and did unbelievable research into the play that I, as someone who had already completed 6 extra years of education ahead of her, had never heard of, much less even considered. It was a brilliant analysis of how Hamlet understands himself as a character in a play. He's aware of it in the story. And I wonder if there's something like a metaphor in that for all of us when it comes to curiosity. Understanding ourselves as characters in a play, understanding ourselves as folks that play with ideas and with knowledge and that help us to construct our reality in that way. The reward is the knowing, it's not the utility of the knowing. Fast forward 20 more years. I always tell that story to my current students when we're reading the play Hamlet. I always say, curiosity and excellence in academics, it's not to do with age and it's not to do with your degrees. It's to do with your level of interest in the world around you and your ability to find those things that make your mind light on fire. And the kids all said, who is this woman? God, I can't believe she would have said that. That's way beyond me. I never would have thought anything like that. And I said, of course you could have. It's just you've got to give yourself permission to do those things that will feed your head. And they said, whatever happened to her? And I said, gosh, I don't know. He said, how would you not know? I said, well, kids fall in and out of your life, and students do, I mean to say. And, I don't know. I unfortunately left her name on the essay, and I had it sitting on a desk, and the kids found the name, and they Googled her. And she had become a teacher. And that's curiosity. So, I hope you'll tune in next time for another in the series on, not curiosity, on Mentored. And I wish you all the best. And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.